I'm going to say something I bet y'all would never think you'd hear from me. I actually agree with a liberal on something, and I agree very, 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 very much. I would love to elevate their opinion directly to you, okay? This is me fully endorsing the opinion of a liberal person, an actual mainstay within the Democratic Party. Ezra Klein, on his podcast, came out and said he is in favor of the Democratic Party shutting down the government on September 30th to stop the Trump administration from being able to continue to terrorize American people. And he explicitly says that not doing this at that point would be them not only allowing fascism to continue out of fear, but potentially helping it directly. And I think that that's wonderful. And I have to say, props to Ezra Klein. I don't think Abundance is that good of a book. I think that generally speaking, he's like a little dorky, but that's okay. I'm willing to put my differences aside with him right now to tell you, please go elevate that message. Please talk about it. If you are a person who has ever wished that Corn Pop and other leftists like him would be more fucking pragmatic, here we go. Okay, I'm going to come over to his side of the aisle. I'm going to stand with him. I stand with Ezra. Okay? Shut this shit down. Get the Democrats in the Senate to agree to shut it down. This is now a mainstream political opinion. Shut it down.
In just a few hours, President Trump and the Republicans are going to shut down the federal government. And here's why they're doing it. They want to force tax credits that make health insurance affordable to expire. What does that mean? So if you're a family of four in Connecticut making $128,000, that's solidly middle class. Right now you pay a lot of money, $925 a month. But starting January 1st, without those tax credits, you'll be paying over $4,000 a month. And that's what will happen if they get their way.
Okay, let's talk government shutdown. What does it mean? What do you need to know? I'll tell you. So Congress has the power of the purse. That means that they control how our tax dollars are spent. And it's their job to make sure that those tax dollars are spent in the best interests of we, the taxpayers. All right? So what we found out when that big, beautiful bill was passed was that 15 million Americans were going to lose their health care coverage. What we found out when that big, beautiful bill was passed was that the people who get their health care coverage from the ACA, their premiums are going to go up about 75%. So rough numbers, if somebody's paying $100 a month, that's going to go up to $175 a month. That's more than most of those families can afford. So the Democrats said, fine, you want to pass your budget? We will do that if you make sure those 15 million Americans get to keep their health care coverage and you make sure that those premiums don't go up that 75%. Well, I heard a Republican on the news today come out and say the reason that we won't do that is because the Democrats want to make sure that dead people still get their health care coverage. Or the reason we won't do that is because the Democrats want to make sure that the people that are here illegally still get their health care coverage. They already don't. So fine, if that's what you want to make sure doesn't happen, I'm sure the Democrats are fine with that. Let's have the Republicans sit down with the Democrats and they can write that into the budget. They can say, we're going to make sure these people still have access to their health care coverage. We are going to remove that 75% increase in premium and also write in there, no dead people get their health care coverage and undocumented people don't get their health care coverage. Fine, that could be done. All you need is for both sides to sit down at the table and agree and write it in. But guess what you need to have that happen? You have to have both sides show up. Guess who's not on Capitol Hill? The Republicans. They're not there. Speaker Johnson told them not to come. So while the Democrats are there trying to make a deal, the Republicans aren't even available. They're not there. They're too busy on the news shows trying to blame the Democrats. Listen, one side's fighting for you to make sure that you have health care coverage. The other side won't even show up to the table. So when this happens, make sure you apply blame where it belongs. It belongs to the people who aren't at work on Monday morning and again, aren't at work on Tuesday morning. All right, let's go.
Figured out Trump's little secret, and he's going to try to pull it off right in front of us. Now, I don't know if he's going to let the government shut down, but if he does, I know he's not going to lose a wink of sleep over it, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics just released a 73-page report on what they'll do if the government shuts down. And in that 73-page report was the news that they will not release a September jobs report on Friday if the government is shut down. Also won't release weekly unemployment claims. And in the middle of October, if the government's still shut down, they won't release inflation data either. And on top of that, they're going to stop collecting data from employers the whole time, which would virtually guarantee October's report is corrupted and incomplete, not unlike every sentence out of Trump's mouth. And the timing really couldn't be better because a major job market researcher just announced that seasonal hiring is the lowest it's been since 2009, which if you recall was a catastrophic recession. And of course everyone knows the job market is trash because of Donald Trump's tariffs and the nonstop chaos in the economy when all employers want is stability. But Trump wants to hide from it because if you don't count it, it isn't real. Just like back in 2020 when a whole ship full of passengers who were sick desperately needed a dock so that the passengers could find a hospital. Trump didn't want them him to dock here, not because he was worried about getting doctors sick, but because he didn't want to count 14 cases. Because really, when it comes down to it, that is all we are to people like Trump. Numbers. If we're good, he claims them, and if they're bad, he either hides from it or blames us for it. Unfortunately for Trump, because we live in the real world, not in mansions with golden ballrooms, we don't need the BLS to tell us it's terrible. All we have to do is ask ourselves one question. Is Trump still the president? We see you, Donald, and we'll see you at the midterms.
Everybody realizes that a government shutdown affects air traffic controllers, border patrol agents, TSA, all federal workers that are required to go to work still. They're deemed essential, and they go without pay. And while they're not legally allowed to strike, after weeks go on, like the 2018-2019 one, they just called out sick, stopped coming to work because, some people couldn't afford it. They could not afford gas in their cars to come to work, even when the banks were furloughing their payments, and they were racking things up on their credit cards because they had no paycheck. And they think that ICE agents are part of border patrol, and they think that they're going to go without pay for 2, 3, 4 weeks. No. They make starting $46,000 a year, even with a $50,000 bonus. No. And last time when controllers stopped going to work, they created mass chaos at airports because there were so many delays, as well as with TSA workers. And that put pressure on Congress to come up with a deal. So that's likely on target to happen again this time. But now with the mass amount of border enforcement and agents everywhere, they think they can go that long without funding them too. I don't think so. So as much as I do not like shutdowns and think that they are a stupid pawn against the average civil servant, I'm for this one. I feel like this is going to be a really scary next 3.5 years. One more thing, training pauses when they are in a shutdown, so nobody's training. Meaning all the shit that Duffy is touting about, they're training the very best and they're doing all this work to make sure that we have more controllers because that's such a problem. That's going to cease to exist until the shutdown's over. And then that puts a backlog on training and creates a domino effect. So that's a moot point now. I really can't believe that we're only 9 months into it. It's fucking insane.
We all have to get behind the Democrats calling for a shutdown. And Trump supporters, I am talking to you too. We need the Affordable Care Act subsidies to become permanent. And over 50 conservative groups are urging Trump to let them expire. And let me tell you, this is one example of the math. A couple who are 55 years old, collectively bringing in $85,000 a year, currently pay, on average, in healthcare premiums, $7,500 a year. If these Affordable Care Act subsidies expire, their premium, are you listening to me, Trump supporters? Their premium jumps to $24,000 a year. So while the billionaire class continues to become ungodly wealthy under this administration, private healthcare insurers and all of their executives are going to make a shit ton of money because they'll get to charge you another $17,000 a year. Just a couple making $85,000 a year. A lot of us don't make that much. Who can afford to have 25% of their income go to healthcare premiums? We're just going to become uninsured. No one's going to be able to afford that. Are you ready for this, Trump supporters? Instead of owning the libs, can we not all get together and agree this is really, really, really bad and it's okay to jump sides one issue at a time? Can you do that to save yourselves? Please.
Hey guys, it's Will from the Back 40, and I hope you're having a great day. There are a lot of people around the country today asking the question, is it worth it to shut down the federal government? In this humble farmer's opinion, the answer is yes, and I'm going to tell you why right now. The bottom line is that the big beautiful bill instigates a reversal in American healthcare that will be devastating for the American people, but in particular for rural America. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. Now, first, I want to talk about the hypocrisy of our Republican politicians. And remember, at Back 40 Action, we'll support any candidate that believes in good rural policy. But you can't talk about bad policy without talking about the politicians that pass it. Republican support of the big beautiful bill is going to spell the death knell for healthcare in rural America. Folks, they cut $137 billion with a B from rural healthcare, and the tendrils of Medicaid reach deep into rural healthcare in this country. 3 out of 4 people in long-term healthcare centers rely on Medicaid. Most of the children in rural America rely on Medicaid for their healthcare coverage, and a large segment of the adult population in rural America does as well. There's no way you can fully fund rural hospitals and clinics and keep them operating to offer all of the services that are needed for healthcare in rural America with the cuts that have been put into the big beautiful bill directly affecting Medicaid. Now, there's something else that happened that I want to address right now because it makes me sick at my stomach. And that is that in an effort to try to soothe over the political blowback in rural America, the Republicans passed a $50 billion bribe that they wanted to pass off to the people of rural America to get us to overlook the fact that they cut $137 billion from our healthcare services here in this part of the country. I've seen letters from a congressman in Missouri, Jason Smith, another letter from a congressman here in Missouri, Sam Graves. Across the board and across the country, these congressmen actually have the nerve to send out letters telling their governors and other office holders in their state that they saved rural health care by passing this $50 billion bribe and telling their governors, go out there and apply for the money. Imagine that. They've turned the funding of rural health care in this country into the Hunger Games, where governors across the country in rural America have to compete against one another to make the best case possible to get a paltry sum of funds that doesn't even touch the amount of money that was cut from the beginning. And if you don't think this is going to have ramifications in rural America, you are dead wrong. 3.5 million people are going to lose their health insurance at the end of this year because of the cuts to the tax subsidies that were offered to help pay for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act and through the exchange. 3.5 million people. There were also cuts in that program to Medicare that nobody ever talks about. And in the long term, 15 million people across this country are going to lose health care. And these aren't freeloaders who can't pay for any of their health care. That's the argument being made. The politicians want you to think that it's lazy people that rely on Medicaid. It's not. These subsidies go to people across America that go to work every day. They're simply tax breaks that they get because they pay for their own insurance out of pocket through the ACA, and these tax breaks make it a little bit more affordable for them. And the bottom line is the majority of people on Medicaid work anyway, so that dog won't hunt. The bottom line is we're cutting healthcare in this country so that we can provide billions of dollars in tax breaks for billionaires across this country. That's it. End of story. That's what's happening. And it's wrong, and we've got to stand up and fight against it. So yes, even though it's going to be painful, even though many federal workers are going to be impacted, and there'll be people in this country who are impacted as well, I think it's time we shut down the government and take a stand for the health care of the American people and for the benefit of everyone who gets up in the morning not knowing how they're going to handle the next medical emergency when it comes.
We've got breaking news up here on Capitol Hill right now. The government shut down. Now, we know that funding deadline was September 30th at 11:59 p.m. Congress failed to pass a funding bill before that deadline, which means federal agencies no longer have money. Thousands of federal workers are going to be furloughed. And the big question now is, how does Congress get out of the shutdown? Well, both parties right now are trading blame on who's going to carry the onus of the shutdown. Democrats say it's going to be squarely on Republicans. Republicans say that is all on Democrats. Now, I was in press conferences the night of the shutdown deadline with Leader Thune, Republican Leader Thune, and Democratic Leader Schumer. They're both extremely dug in on their position. So right now, there's not a clear way out of a shutdown. And I caught up with Speaker Mike Johnson just a few hours before that midnight deadline, and I asked him, how does Congress get out of this shutdown? He wasn't sure. He said Schumer needs to hop on board with Republicans. Republicans are saying the same thing. Right now, Congress is at an impasse, and we are in the first government shutdown since 2019.
I said this before, but the biggest reason why people are conservative is for convenience sake. And this whole government shutdown may reveal that depending on how long it goes. They're already trying to spin the narrative that this is Democrats' fault, and they're doing this intentionally to put the burden of convenience on Democrats. They want the Democrats to cave from public pressure to accepting a bill that will take away public services for the American people. And I guarantee you the Republican Party is going to use this moment to further exploit aspects of the government, even with the government being shut down. And this comes weeks after people have been pressuring them to release the files, which they do not want to do.
It's October 1st, and the government has officially shut down as of this morning. First of all, Jasmine Crockett for president. Second of all, thank you, Jasmine, for keeping us focused. As the shutdown looms, let's play What Are the Facts? Fact number 1. Trump wants to distract from the Epstein files. The Epstein files aren't going away, babe. We want to see them, even if the government shuts down for the rest of time, which honestly, part of me would be fine with, because y'all suck. Second fact, Republicans run the House, Senate, and the White House. If there is a shutdown, real math says it's the Republicans' shutdown. That's right. The Republicans at some point are going to have to own this economy. They're going to have to own the jobs market. They're going to have to own the food costs. They're going to have to own all the problems that, frankly, President Trump is creating with tariffs and various other fuckery. And the final fact, which data absolutely backs up, is that Republicans only know how to break shit and then deflect and deny any accountability. And if you don't believe me, please go look at the deficit and the spending during each Democratic presidency, and each time it's followed by a Republican presidency where they jack up the deficit and jack up the spending again. And it's an endless cycle of back and forth on a seesaw from hell. And I think that both the right and the left can agree at this point that we do need significant changes in this country. We need to see our cost of living lowered. We need something to change with our medical system. And frankly, I don't care who handles that. Republicans, it's your move. The ball is in your court.
We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown because of the shutdown, we can do things medically and other ways, including benefits. We can cut large numbers of people out. We don't want to do that, but we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse. And, we're cutting that.
They're taking a risk by having a shutdown because we can do things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. We can do things that are irreversible, he said, the leader of our country, to the citizens of our country. If they don't give me what I want, if they don't bend the knee, stop making things so difficult, I'll take away even more from the citizens of the country that I have been elected to represent. Does that feel like a representative to you? He will take anything away from any of us, all of us. He does not care about any of us. Even those of us who follow him, he does not care about. When will you understand? This man is not working for you. He is dismantling your country and selling it for parts, and he's going to leave us here to suffer the consequences while he and his friends pillage the entire world's resources. This man does not care about us. He is a domestic threat to our nation. That's none of my business, right?
My friends, this is not a normal government shutdown. Let me explain the stakes and how we got here. The Trump regime, along with Republicans, wanted to fund the government with a continuing resolution that would have kept existing funding levels the same. But if Democrats had accepted that deal, they would have effectively given approval to all of the terrible and wildly unpopular policies that Trump has pushed through since retaking office. That includes his funding cuts to public broadcasting and foreign aid programs. It also includes Trump's signature piece of legislation, the Big Ugly Bill, that gives the richest Americans a giant tax cut, financed largely by cuts in Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, and clean energy programs. That Big Ugly Bill passed the Senate last July because it required only 51 Republican votes in a special rule called reconciliation. This time, Republicans needed Democratic votes to avoid a shutdown and to continue those big, ugly policies. They couldn't do it with just 51 votes. They needed more votes than that. Democrats, therefore, became suddenly important to them. Why the hell would any Democrat go along with that? I've lived through government shutdowns. Under normal circumstances, I understand why compromises are made to keep the government running. I have been in favor of keeping the government running, but our government is not running right now. It's effectively been shut down for months as Trump has destroyed checks and balances, usurped the power of the purse from Congress, and unleashed an authoritarian nightmare throughout the country. Democrats cannot cave into this shutdown. They must not operate as if what Trump is doing right now is normal, because it's not normal. In the short term, Democrats have to use their leverage to restore funding to vital programs that millions of Americans rely on, like Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. And in the long term, they've got to paint a bigger picture for the American people about the devastating realities of Trump's regime. This is an opportunity for Democrats to fight back, not capitulate. Please, if you agree, share this video.
Now to the potential impacts a government shutdown could have, not just on federal workers, but all of us. NBC's Brian Chung is at the big board to break it all down. Hey, Brian.
Well, hey there, as we do head towards a potential government shutdown, there's a lot at stake in terms of the economy, but also for the hundreds of thousands of federal workers out there who could be facing paycheck delays. Again, a lot of them actually might be forced to work because they're deemed essential, but would not be getting paid to do so. That can lead to some problems, which I'll explain later on. There's also government data delays. We're actually expecting a big jobs report telling us what the economy looked like in the month of September. That's due on Friday. But if the government's shut down, we won't get that report at all. And then even for people that don't work in the government or watch government data, there could be closures of national parks and museums. If you were planning a trip this weekend, you might have to scrub it because of the shutdowns related to the Smithsonian, also on the National Mall and across those parks around the country. Now, when it comes to the critical services that will still be online, I want to point out things like Social Security, Medicare will still be running uninterrupted. Things like ICE, as well as Customs and Border Protection, they will continue to operate as well. There are a few things here worth flagging. First, notably, Veterans Affairs. Yes, healthcare will still be provided at VA hospitals, but new enrollees could experience some delays with some employees potentially not working. Also, TSA. In theory, your trip to the airport should be uninterrupted because those workers at those air traffic control towers will still be deemed essential. But as we've seen in previous government shutdowns, if they're working without pay, some of them choose not to show up at all, and all it takes is for a few controllers not to show up to really lead to long delays at the airport. Worth thinking about if you are traveling this weekend, and that comes to pass as well. When it comes to potential furloughs, we are talking about tens of thousands of employees. These are just a few agencies that we've been looking at, most notably HHS, where over 30,000 could be furloughed. And I bring this up because we've also heard from the Office of Management and Budget that there could even be these reduction in force notices for permanent layoffs if a government shutdown comes to pass. Could that be tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of workers laid off? We will have to see. The one last thing I want to point out here is that markets don't really appear to react negatively to a government shutdown. shutdown, in fact, in the longest government shutdown we've seen in American history, which is in December of 2018, where we saw the government shut down for 34 days. The stock market, the S&P 500, actually went up by 10% for separate reasons unrelated to the government shutdown. There was expectations for a Fed rate cut. Also, there was a big sell-off going into that particular shutdown. But again, it seems like market strategists aren't really taking this too seriously in terms of what it might do to the stock market. But nonetheless, some economic impacts and everyday impacts still floating as this government shutdown approaches.
The federal government just shut down. It's happened before, in fact, several times over the past 50 years. Sometimes for as little as a day, sometimes it's dragged on for weeks. Congress appropriates money for the federal government, typically through a fiscal year, which runs to the end of September. And if it doesn't appropriate more money, then the government has to shut down. And the most recent shutdown in 2018 into 2019 was the longest on record, lasting more than a month. That was only a partial shutdown. Some agencies remained open, but even so, it was tremendously disruptive. We saw lines at food banks as federal workers who were working without paychecks waited in order to get food assistance. In terms of the economic impact, I think we can kind of think of this in three buckets. The first, and in some ways the most significant, is hundreds of thousands of federal workers will be furloughed, and those who continue working will have to do so without pay, at least for the duration of the shutdown. For the macroeconomy, for total unemployment, for total spending, the impacts, at least in past episodes, have been relatively minor. Federal workers eventually do get back pay for the period that they miss. But there's a third category as well, which is that one of the things that is shutting down is our economic data collection. We're not going to get data on the labor market, on inflation, on spending. And that has a real impact, particularly for officials at the Federal Reserve who are trying to sort through what is happening with the economy right now, trying to weigh the conflicting forces of unemployment and inflation. And if they don't have the data that they need to make good decisions, the risks are greater that they make an error and that we end up with higher unemployment or faster inflation than we otherwise would. We have no idea how long this shutdown is going to last, but the last few shutdowns have been a bit longer than average, and the longer it goes on, the more significant the impacts will be, both for the workers and for the economy as a whole.
Welcome to the shutdown of 2025.
The last thing we want to do is shut it down, but a lot of good can come down from shutdowns.
They don't give a damn about the harm they will cause with their shutdown.
In the past few days, the White House and Democrats made no real effort to reach a compromise.
We are in this fight until we win this fight.
So here we are, funding has lapsed, many government programs are going to cease, hundreds of thousands of federal workers will likely be put on furlough, and an uncertain economic and political moment has arrived. In the past, usually a shutdown is about a specific bill or a specific policy that both sides dig in on. This shutdown is almost more philosophical. Democrats are trying to dig in their heels. They feel like they've been pushed around by the White House for months, and they see this as a rare opportunity to try to push back and create some obstruction. Now, President Trump sees almost no incentive to negotiate with Democrats. Democrats are the ones that are blocking a vote in the Senate. He's painting this shutdown as something that Democrats have caused.
They want to give healthcare to illegal immigrants, which will destroy healthcare for everybody else in our country.
A lot of discretion for how this shutdown is going to play out will rest on the shoulders of Russell Vought, who is the White House Office of Management and Budget Director. What the White House has said could happen this time is that not only would these people be sent home without pay, but the White House could try to fire potentially hundreds of thousands of federal workers, so that even once Congress reopens government, those people would not come back.
We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like.
Now, the White House believes they have the authority to do this. Democrats say there's no way they can do this legally, and we're going to have to see if they follow through on this in the days to come.
We are less than 3 hours away from this shutdown. And I just want to start by asking you, you said today we're in this fight until we win. I think a lot of people are happy to hear that. Tell us more about what that looks like. How does this end for people?
Well, we're here in the Capitol, and as Leader Schumer has said, as I've repeatedly said, as House Democrats continue to say, we're ready, we're willing, we're able to sit down with anyone, anytime, any place, to arrive at a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people avoids a shutdown, and keeps the government open. But at the same period of time, what we also have made clear is that we're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people in the midst of a Republican health care crisis that is devastating to people all across the country. Republicans, as you pointed out, control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They have the ability to fund the government, but to the extent that they're interested in Democratic support, then of course we want to make sure, as part of a bipartisan process, that we are looking out for the American people in rural America, in urban America, in small town America, in the heartland of America, and in black and brown communities all across America, collectively, all of whom have been devastated in different ways by the ongoing Republican assault on health care.
I will say, because I saw some senators speculating about this, and I saw some Republican members of Congress saying, oh, well, if we have this shutdown, it's because of AOC. Well, if that's the case, my office is open and you are free to walk in and negotiate with me directly. Because what I'm not going to do is tolerate 4 million uninsured Americans because Donald Trump decided one day that he wants to just make sure that kids are dying because they don't have access to insurance. That's what's not going to happen. And so if those senators think that we're having a shutdown because of me, they're free to enter my office and negotiate, because what we're not going to do is allow all of millions of people in this country to not be able to afford their insulin and their chemotherapy. So come strike a deal with me if that's what they really think is going on.
I'm in HR, and with this impending government shutdown working for DOD, there are a few things that I have to prepare and make sure my employees know that I think you should also know. One, your pay might not be coming in, so places like Navy Fed usually will pay you during this time, so be sure with your credit union or your bank what situation could be happening there with your money and its protections if we are to go through a government shutdown. 2, find out about your benefits. Are you still required to pay for them during that time so they're continued? Do you have to send in a check? Ask your HR this. And 3, your PTO, floating holidays, whatever it may be. If you're unlimited PTO, are you allowed to use any during this time? And with the recruiting side of things, sometimes you can actually move to a position that's not currently impacted. So check that out, find out about your policies, and follow me because I'm your HR now. In HR, and I just wanted to say this part 2 on the government shutdown. The last one lasted about 35 days. If this is going to happen to you and you're essential, you're required to go to work, but you are not going to be paid. Unless you are furloughed and you are not essential, then you do not have to go to work. What you will see is at TSA lines and airports and things like that, a lot of them won't show up, so airports are going to likely be delayed if this goes through. And one reminder I wanted to remind people is sign up for unemployment if this does happen. Do it as soon as possible, because in this day of age, we don't know how long this could last.
How is a shutdown going to wash through the economy?
Well, first of all, we know that the most direct impact are federal workers, in the military, these workers, people who are deemed essential, who have to show up to work and not get paid. I can't put a finer point on this, that the personal financial lives of these people has been upended, and it's intense. So with hundreds of thousands of people being out of work, some being forced to go to work without pay, it could cause a little bit of a dent in the economy. But I don't think that's the issue. I actually think it's a much more personal issue, that these people are going to struggle, and the people that where they shop are going to struggle. And although those wages get paid back usually when the government reopens, that doesn't help you if you're fighting with your landlord.
That doesn't help if you need the money right at the second. But what about big government programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Well,
do those stay intact?
Totally intact. You'll receive benefits, SNAP programs, food stamps. Those things are actually operating as normal. The one thing I'll say is that if you have an application with one of these programs, that may be a little bit delayed. But you will receive your checks. Don't worry. Just one thing, though, that I want to be clear about with the people also is that you should be communicating with anyone. If you feel like that man who said this is the worst case scenario, you communicate with your landlord, you communicate with your utility company, you say, I could be late. Do not hide, because we really want these people to stay afloat.
Do people give you grace during that time?
Sometimes, and sometimes not. It depends how long this lasts. I mean, for every week this goes on, people are going to struggle. They're going to dip into their savings. What I hope they don't do is go into credit card debt. Hopefully they have some savings that they can access. Maybe you actually pull some money and borrow it from your retirement plan if you're feeling the pinch. That's something we should consider.
I'm going to show you the whole playbook for a government shutdown, front to back. I'm not only going to lecture you on what to do, I'm going to do it for you, okay? So here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. They're going to tell you if everything is already gone. That's the first lie. Yesterday you had checks. Yesterday teachers had grants. Yesterday the pantry line closed with the receipt in your hand. Today the inbox is empty though. It's empty though. The lunch tray is hollow. They'll call it inevitable, but that's propaganda. It's a neat trick to make theft feel like weather. I just want you to understand it's a hostage script. They cut the lights, they call the pause a verdict, and then they wait to see who keeps shouting for the hostages. They want you to fold. They want you to fold. They want you to remember less than you do. But this is how it works overall. This is the playbook. Stop funding, put people in the dark, tell camera crews who was broken all along, push that phrase until grief sounds like a fact, and then watch the despair do the rest. People stop fighting for what they think never existed. That's why people don't fight, because they think it doesn't exist. And people don't fight for things that don't exist. I just want you to understand. I want you to put that together. So I'm about to say some facts that people need to understand. Anybody talking about, oh, it's not that big a deal. SNAP will run out in 3 weeks. TSA workers, they will go without checks and start calling in sick. Contractors will miss pay and their bills will grow teeth. Refunds will stall. Farmers will hold empty invoices. Parks will clog with trash. Kids will lose breakfast. That's the SNAP zone. 3 to 4 weeks from now. It's never on day one. It's never on day one, but that's the day that the country stops pretending. They think they can hold the rope until you forget the name of the hand who pulled it. They're wrong. So I'm going to say the chooser, okay? This was not inevitable. They took it today. They took it today. Anybody talking about it's not a big deal, I want you to understand. I want you to understand they're playing into it. That's all it is. That's all it is. That the martyrdom has been a problem recently, and they trying to get all their little moderates out of the section. So I need you to say it clearly. This was not inevitable. They took it today, right? Post a timestamp photo. Post a before check and then an after empty inbox. Tag your rep, tag your governor, tag the name that voted to let it die. Say the county, say the lender, say the school, make a map of who's hurting, and then make it a target for truth. I just want you to understand, do not let already gone bury what was already here. Please take a screenshot of school lunch yesterday and today. Record the TSA worker that says we're working but we're not paid. Please film that contractor's unpaid invoice. I want you to understand, if a Republican governor says reopen, that needs to be over every national law. That's what we need to see. That's what we need to see. I'll even give you something creative. When an RAF notice lands, take a picture of it, file it with the lawyer, post the docket, and then turn the legal filings into headlines. Judge said this was a choice. Judge said this was a choice, because when the judge prints your truth, they hand you neutral language that you can repeat. I need you to understand they took it from you today. They took it from you today. What? I'm just saying the facts. I'm just saying the facts. All it is a hostage budget.